Friends, I have the infamous racist CBC guest booking form to show you. It's the form a former state broadcaster employee mentioned in her article explaining her resignation. We're going to go through it together today. I'll show you how the CBC demanded to know what specific kind of person of color potential guests were and what gender the guest was so that CBC could meet their arbitrary diversity quotas. I just checked. The CBC website search shows they have 1,783 stories on the evils of racial profiling, 5 more than when I first started writing this story a week ago. But I think, as they say, the phone call might be coming from inside the house. Why is any of this relevant? Well, CBC seems really concerned about racial profiling, accusing Canadians of racism all over the place. That is, of course, while CBC star Wendy Mesley was busy using the N-word in staff meetings, but okay. It's even worse than that. However, CBC segments guests based on racial profiling, and it was built right into their guest booking policy. I can show you. State-funded, Trudeau-enabled CBC racism in action in black and white. I have that guest booking form. But first, let me tell you why we went looking for the form through access to information. And since we aren't the CBC, we would never take a penny from Justin Trudeau. So you can support our investigative journalism at a special website, rebelinvestigates.com. Anyway, my interest was piqued because of this Substack article written by a former CBC producer named Tara Henley about why she left the CBC. She had had enough. Look at this. To work at the CBC in the current climate is to embrace cognitive dissonance and to abandon journalistic integrity. It is to sign on enthusiastically to a radical political agenda that originated on Ivy League campuses in the United States and spread through American social media platforms that monetize outrage and stoke societal divisions. It is to pretend that the woke worldview is near universal, even if it is far from popular with those you know and speak to and interview and read. To work at the CBC now is to accept the idea that race is the most significant thing about a person and that some races are more relevant to the public conversation than others. It is in my newsroom to fill out racial profile forms for every guest you book to actively book more people of some races and less of others. Now, I wanted to see that form for myself. And then I wanted to show you. It's the CBC, so we pay for this racism. We deserve to know what they are doing with that $1.5 billion annual subsidy. So here's the form. I'll publish it here for you so you can see it for yourself, but let's go through it together. CBC Guest Sourcing Survey for Current Affairs. Current Affairs is currently collecting publicly available diversity data on its guests with a view to ensuring that its programming better reflects the diversity of Canadian communities. Please complete the information below based on publicly available information. Please answer the following questions about each person or source in your story that has contributed meaningfully. And they've attached a convenient Google document in case some of these are so social justice-y that even a CBC employee is unclear about what is being asked of them to define. Let's keep going. So they list the show name wherein someone is supposed to select the show name for their guest. And I'm sure since this is the CBC, you've never watched any of these shows. I know for sure I have not. Let's keep going. The date, the producer, the segment slug, the guest name, the guest title, the type of segment. So they even have to do this for random streeters. That's what we call it when we go out and we talk to people at protests or out on the street and we ask them a question about current affairs or a topic or a campaign. CBC even makes their employees fill out diversity data on those people. Bizarre. Let's keep going. Genre of story, of course. They go through everything, including human interest and crime. CBC Guest Sourcing Survey for Current Affairs. Gender, race, and ethnic group questions. Gender, female, she, her, male, he, him, non-binary, they, them, or unknown and undeclared. Race and ethnic groups. Indigenous, white, Caucasian, person of color or racialized, but not including Black or Indigenous, biracial, multiracial, Black, and unknown. Additional details of ethnic origin for POC, that's person of color in social justice jargon. African, and then it lists all the countries that may fall under the CBC's designation of what it means to be African. Arab, and then it lists all the countries, including Palestine, wherein you would fall under CBC's definition of what it means to be Arab, multiracial. East Asian, and then they list all the Asian groups that CBC has decided qualify you to be East Asian. First Nations, so that's North American Indian or Métis. First Nations second category, North American Indian, but Inuk and Inuit, so they've made a distinction there. Latin, Central, and South American, and then they list all the countries that if you are from, you qualify, at least according to the CBC, to be Latin, Central, and South American. Southeast Asian, which is different than East Asian, and they help identify the countries that you might be from. South Asian, which is different than Southeast Asian, which is different than apparently East Asian. And then CBC has listed the countries that this may include, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and then West Indian and Caribbean, and then they list all the countries there. Now they want to know if any of your diversity demographic information is even remotely relevant to the topic that they have you speaking about. Was the guest speaking specifically about a topic related to their ethnicity? Yes, no, unknown. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter because CBC is still collecting this information on every single person anyway. Let's keep going. Is the character an appointed figure, i.e. a politician? Politicians are not appointed. They're elected, but this also might mean political appointees and judges, people like that. Yes or no. And then you can submit the form, and then CBC knows everything about every single person appearing on the network, even if it doesn't matter or isn't relevant to the show topic. And by and large, it generally isn't, because we are supposed to be a cultural mosaic and not siloed into certain demographic groups by the state broadcaster. What a bunch of absolute weirdos. What does someone's gender or color or ethnic background have to do with what they have to say about news topics that are completely unrelated to their gender or color? What a toxic workplace. It's like Justin Trudeau accusing Canadians of his sexism and racism sins, the ones he's guilty of. Well, it would appear CBC is guilty of the racial profiling they accuse other institutions of. Funny that. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Today's information about CBC's racial profiling form was made available through access to information filings. These filings are expensive and they're time consuming, but we think it's important to know what our public institutions are doing behind closed doors when they think nobody is watching. Well, friends, we are always watching. To support our independent access to information investigations, please consider making a donation to our special fund at rebelinvestigates.com.